Are we ready? Good evening, everybody. If you could take your seats so we can start with tonight's installment of the Roundtable. Duma, the seat. You think because you're short I can't see you from that far? I can. All right, thank you, and good evening. My name is Kaya Sitole, and I am the person who's going to be speaking in between the other important people for the rest of today in my capacity as the master of the ceremony. So usually people say master of ceremonies as if there's more than one. No, there's only one. This is the most important ceremony happening today. And here we are. So, of course, one of the most important things about the CEO Roundtable is the question of architecture and configuration. So what we tend to do is that we arrive quite early to check that there is indeed a round table. We've had a couple of events where the table was not actually round, which sort of defeated the purpose. So this is indeed a round table. I can confirm that, so you are at the right venue. So if you got a webinar link for something else, then yeah, that's not where it ought to be. So I can tell you an interesting story that I was speaking to our two esteemed guests earlier today, and I said, well, I was actually on my way somewhere before I got called to come here. They didn't ask me where I was supposed to go. Had they asked, they would have known that I'm actually supposed to be on my way to Wimbledon. But because ABSIP is this important, I decided to take a detour here, so I'll deal with the Wimbledon issues later on. So thank you very much for those that have joined us here physically, and also those that have joined us online. I believe the webinar link is now live, and on that webinar link, feel free to pose the difficult questions. And the reason I need you to pose the difficult questions is that since you're not here, I can tell you that at the back of the room, there's some very fine wine. And the problem with having fine wine is that the people that want to benefit from the fine wine tend to hesitate to ask the person who's supplying the wine the difficult questions. So because the people in here are not going to ask the difficult questions because they want to get the wine and not be kicked out before the end of the event, we are going to rely on you on the online platform to send us those questions, and then I'll pose them to you. Feel free to pose them in any language. We're very multilingual here. I can tell it's a very diverse audience that we've got here in line with what ABSIP does. So why are we here? Well, firstly, it's nice to get free wine on a Monday evening, but actually there is a far more important purpose. And the purpose behind tonight's conversation is to engage in difficult conversations that sometimes we get accused of running away from. So the difficult conversations are the conversations around where are we going as a nation? What are we doing? What are we doing different? What should we do differently? And what should we stop doing at all? This is the sixth in a series of conversations where we've had some very, very difficult, but constructive conversations about the most topical issues affecting the country today. I think everybody acknowledges that there are things that are not working well in the country, and of course the ones that have the greatest level of influence tend to be the ones that run the economy themselves, and of course that's why we have the CEOs. So it's not because the rest of you are not important, but we've just worked out that the ones that are actually going to get us them and are going to fund us getting them are probably the ones with those types of titles. So we're starting with them, and then we'll cascade the conversation onto the general ABSIP membership. So that is essentially the big idea. We've had difficult conversations around transformation. We've had difficult conversations around the leadership deficit that a lot of people say exists in the country. And in tonight's conversation, we're not only going to follow up on those, but we're also going to ask very unique questions about recent developments. You've heard about employment equity going the other way, and then there's more light today. I don't know if it means load shedding is over, and I hope I'm not jinxing it, but apparently there's a bit more light now. Does it signal that there's been a change in what the country's prospects are? We do not know, and these are the type of conversations that we want you guys to engage us on. So on that platform, please feel free to join us. If you're in the room and you're hoping to get some wine later on, in case you need to go to the restroom, it's there at the back. And in about 17 minutes time, and this thing is going to embarrass me because it always goes wrong, but in about 17 minutes time, we are supposed to switch over from a generator to normal electricity because we've got normal electricity now. So if something goes dark for like a second or two, don't panic. More importantly, do not run away because you might spill over the wine, okay? So it'll be about a couple of seconds where we're going to transition onto normal electricity, which is something that is happening a bit more frequently these days, so please don't shy away. So on that note, we are going to move full steam ahead. I like all these puns tonight. And when we're moving full steam ahead, we're firstly going to have a snapshot of what Stanlib is all about, because I worked out that they could give me a brief and then I'm not going to stop talking, and because it's after 6 p.m., the English bundles are going to get depleted. We thought it was risky for me to be able to do that summary, so we decided to crystallize it onto a video. And after we've crystallized it into a video, we're going to have Nancy Green, who is Executive Head of Human Capital, I thought I was going to get this right, at Stanlib, who's going to introduce to us our two guests, and then the conversation is going to start. And more importantly, I'm pleased to say it is indeed a round table. So the video, please.
Transformation is a business and commercial imperative, but more importantly, a heart imperative. As a leading participant in the asset management industry, we aim to be truly empowered in a transformed organization, committed to accelerating and sustaining transformation that supports economic growth and positively impacts our employees and society. Our strategic approach to this is based on three key pillars.
Our contribution to transformation spans the full spectrum of people development, from recruitment to retention, reward, and upskilling. To play a really meaningful role in advancing women in the industry, our diversity, equality, inclusion, and belonging strategy prioritizes the retention, growth, and development of women. More importantly, we are invested in a culture where every employee feels that they belong, which is a true measure of inclusion.
Our procurement policy enables us to support economic inclusivity by sourcing goods and services from Black-owned and Black women-owned businesses. We contribute to enterprise and supply development in two ways. Firstly, through our partnership with the Association of Savings and Investment South Africa's ESD Fund, which aims to develop and economically empower qualifying Black-owned businesses. Secondly, we provide support through our office infrastructure to an emerging Black-owned asset manager.
Our investment in this area is focused on a socio-economic development to equip the youth with digital and financial skills that is needed in an increasingly digital world. This is important to promote innovations and enable informed financial decisions. As part of our internal culture initiatives, our employees actively participate in volunteering initiatives which aim to support physical as well as psycho-socio needs in our society.
Our transformation journey is further supported through our sustainable investment practices and the integration of ESG factors in the investment decision-making process. We use our investment capabilities to direct and manage capital in line with important social development goals through our Khanyisa Impact Fund. I'm really proud of Stanlib's progress, which has moved us beyond the BE scorecard to having a sustainable impact. Our commitment to this journey and playing a meaningful role in promoting economic inclusivity of those previously marginalized is unwavering.
All right, so you can imagine an organization as big and as diverse as Stanlib always struggles to figure out who they want to introduce the big boss on an event like this. So there was a lottery that we did behind the scenes, and in the lottery, I stumbled upon a post, and this was a post that says that Stanlib hires someone who's been a professional in this financial services sector for over 13 years, and whenever she has worked in any organization, she has always been very clear that the most important asset that that organization has is its people. And her passion is to cultivate the talents and unleash the potential within those people so that they can actually ensure that they work the best they can within the different environments that they're in. So everybody else at Stanlib, once you saw Nancy Green's profile, you knew very well that she was going to be the only one who was going to introduce Ted. Thank you.
Thank you so much. They always warn you to check out what's on social media and the likes.
But it's wonderful to be here this evening. Good evening to everybody, and thank you for that lovely introduction. Polo and team, thank you so much to ABSIP for also allowing us to talk to you about our transformation journey. And it's certainly something that I'm very passionate about, and so is Derek. But before I introduce Derek, our CEO, if you don't mind, I just want to share a little bit about Stanlib's transformation journey to date. And I must say that we focus on progress rather than perfection. And we absolutely make sure that while we're on our journey, that real progress is what matters most. So I joined Stanlib in 2012, and I remember walking into the lifts and being confronted with very serious professionals who predominantly wore crisp shirts and dark colors and suits. But if you walk around our office today, you'll certainly be impressed by how that dress code has changed to a lot more of a relaxed and a be who you are at Stanlib investment professional. Our approach to collaboration has changed as well, and I think our remote hybrid working setup has allowed us to be specifically deliberative around how we collaborate as an organization. We shifted our mindsets and our behaviors to reflect a work environment where our people feel like they belong. Over the years, we've certainly faced the same culture and transformation challenges as most other companies in the financial services sector, and we've had to become intentional about true inclusion and create a workplace where every individual feel like they belong and are making a valuable contribution. We realized over time that despite our best efforts, we needed to do more for women in our organization and in the industry. So we asked our women, give us your honest input via our Voice of Women survey. And their responses was valuable. There were candid accounts of exactly what it felt like to be at Stanlib. There were some really robust suggestions and various wish lists to create a workplace where women feel seen and valued. The common themes that came out of the survey indicated that we needed to focus on our corrective actions towards three major themes. Remuneration certainly topped the log. Our organizational culture was next, and supporting women's career and growth development through mentoring and coaching opportunities came up as part of the top three. We responded with a plan that gave tangible commitments for what we are going to do this year to turn the tide. We benchmarked our salaries against industry standards to address the remuneration concern, and we continue to consistently guide managers and empower employees, especially women, on how to approach and address conversation about this uncomfortable but very important topic. Then our culture. A lot of work is being done and led by our executive team to shape how we show up and lead by example as senior leaders of a progressive asset manager business. It certainly includes defining our ambition to be the most progressive asset manager. It includes defining what it is to really see people for who they are in the workplace and not just see them for a job title getting a task done. We encourage curiosity and a progressive approach to investing, but we have also become better in acknowledging and celebrating our wins so that we can imagine a future that is more sustainable than what it is today. Thirdly, we agree that we must do even more to support and ensure that our women feel that their career and their personal growth is supported even more. And I'm really excited that a couple of weeks ago, Derek and I introduced a comprehensive coaching program for every woman in our business. Our coaching program is in partnership with Gibbs, and it offers a safe circle to help women navigate career challenges, identify opportunities, and develop strategies tailored to their unique goals. Coaching is a top priority, and we've received extensive interest and compliments from our women since the announcement a couple of weeks ago. Thanks, Doma. Outside of our employee opportunities, we really do believe in giving SA's youth a fighting chance in this ever-changing world of finance. We are involved in a few programs, but I'll just highlight one. and I've got a very soft spot for this program. It's called the FOSECA program, and I'm sure most of you in this room may have heard of it. I was approached about a year ago by Michael Arthbotnot from Catalyst, and he then shared this wonderful idea of supporting young graduate women that are leaving university and creating space for them in the asset management industry. We are partnering with the CISA to encourage other asset managers to onboard and orientate young graduate women to provide foundational skills in the workplace through assigning real work, training, mentoring, and coaching within the business sector. It's really a very exciting initiative, and it's certainly gaining a lot of traction and attention. Certainly one to support, and especially if we think about the transformation issues that we all face around women in the investment and asset management industry, we certainly do want to put our shoulder behind this one. I'm going to do a bit of a marketing stint, so if you're interested, please let me know. I would love for you to get involved. I can certainly go on and on about what we're doing to propel our employees and business to greater heights, but I can't forget why we're here tonight. The greatest champion of women in our organization is our CEO, Derek Msibi. And I'm going to take this opportunity to say some things about him that he's probably never heard me say before. After 5 years at Stanlib, I was afforded the opportunity to lead the human capital function. Derek really took a chance on me in this role. Having started as a consultant, and losing my script, having started as a consultant, I knew I would need support to operate at an executive level. Derek was my unofficial sponsor. He was very responsive, very supportive, and often challenged my thinking, and still does today. And to mention that this approach is not just reserved for me, but is reflective of the person leading our organization. Derek is humble about his achievements and views transformation as a heart imperative more than a business imperative or scorecard. He believes you've got to have skin in the game if you want to experience progress. And while he has significant responsibility as a leader of SA's second largest asset manager, he is personally involved in our transformation journey. He took this agenda into his office and gave a young, intelligent woman named Amu Morapa an opportunity to spearhead the transformation strategy. This significant responsibility to own and solidify her business experience under his guidance and mentorship has certainly given a lot of confidence in her career. Under his leadership, Stanlib's transformation strategy truly came alive to go beyond the level 1 BEE contributor status we are now consistently achieving. In what is left of his time, Derek and his wife are parents to 4 children, and just last month, he completed his 20th Comrades Marathon. It is truly inspiring to work with a leader who makes it easy to drive the woman and greater transformation agenda within Stanlib, and a great business partner in integrity. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our Stanlib CEO, Derek Msibi.
And welcome to Polo Leteka. Nobody bothered to introduce me. And they say if you want a job done, get a girl to do it, right? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And good evening, Derek.
Hi, Paula. Nice to finally have this session.
Absolutely, and thank you so very much for agreeing to have this conversation with us. You know, Stanlib has, over the years, been a very consistent ABSIP member. They are a member in good standing, have been for many years. So we're very thankful for that. Even when we could not produce our Section 18 certificates, they still paid nonetheless. And then we are also very proud that when we launched the ABSIP Bursary Fund, ABSIP,
last year.
Stanlib again put their hand up, and they've continued to support that very important initiative. So we're very thankful, Derek, for your continued support for ABSIP. And of course, now that I have done that advert, Nancy, I'll be calling tomorrow to consider doubling the commitment. Yeah, so Derek, thank you again for this opportunity. So we thought we should have these CEO conversations as ABSIP. We conceptualized it a few years ago in response to the realization that we have members such as yourselves. We've got young professionals that are coming up. You are seized with very complex challenges and questions that you are trying to answer as an organization because of the significant role you play. And at the same time, you are trying to transform, you're trying to give opportunity to young up-and-coming professionals. They've got no idea what keeps you up at night, and equally, they want to grow and contribute and make a difference, and they don't know how that looks like or what that looks like. And I think importantly, the generational gap, I often laugh that, the type of professional that comes into our sector today and the one that came in the 1990s are very different people.
Yeah.
So we're trying to bridge the gap. So the whole point really is for us to bring a human face firstly to you. You are Derek Msibi, the CEO of the second largest asset management firm or something in the country, and people want to know who this person is, and they want to know why it is that you would do something as crazy as running the Comrades 20 times. Is it a self-love challenge that you are dealing with here? But also really just, and we've given them an opportunity, of course, to ask questions both virtually as well as here, so that they can also pose very specific questions to you and hopefully give you some ideas on how they think you should be solving some of the issues or challenges that keep you up at night. So this is really to get to know you, to bring the face of the CEOs of this sector to your ordinary people, but also importantly, for another Derek Msibi, I'm sure there's another guy somewhere called Derek Msibi, who's 21 years old, and he never thought he could be the CEO of Stanlib, and he looks at you and he says, oh, he looks like me. He's got the same name as me. Perhaps I too can do it. That's very, very important. So that's why we do this, Derek. I hope you appreciate it from that perspective.
No, I certainly do. I think there's a lot that we can share in terms of our experiences and some of the problems that we are all solving for. They're better done if you solicit other ideas around what is the best approach, because it's very unlikely that some of them are going to be resolved by one person or one institution for that matter. Absolutely. There has to be some form of collaborative effort. And usually that collaborative effort is a function of being open to finding the best ideas and engaging with those best ideas. And the best ideas are, don't grow out of thin air. They come from people. Absolutely. And therefore we've got to be engaging with people as human beings and valuing whatever view they might have. At times it's a very uncomfortable view, but we've got to be engaging and having a battle of ideas.
Absolutely. And thanks for that. I think it is important to emphasize the importance of people as, I think Nancy said, the most important or valuable assets that an organization has. Yeah. But before we get into the serious stuff, when I was doing my articles, somebody said to me, Paul, you shouldn't be an accountant, you should actually be in asset management. And it sounded so sexy. I didn't know, I have no clue. I had no clue what it was and what it entailed, what it involved on a day-to-day basis. Can you share with the young people, what does it really mean to be an asset manager and to run an asset management firm? What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, look, I think you could separate asset management from, as a head of an asset manager, we carry a very large responsibility, in fact, a huge responsibility. My own mother thinks that it's a horrible job to have because you are looking after money that belongs to widows and orphans. And so she sees this as a huge responsibility to apply yourself diligently and to understand the impact that you can have on lives of ordinary people. And so she's never really been comfortable with me in this job, because she says, if you're a doctor, I know that you are getting people to be well. If you're an engineer, you're building stuff. And she just, each time she just feels that if we truly understand the fact that we have got billions of rands of other people's money, and these people wake up every morning and decide to entrust that money to us because they believe that we're going to handle it with due care and skill. She considers us to be just a tremendous responsibility, which she's very proud that to some degree that I'm doing it, but her view would have been, if there was a better job, she would have preferred me to do that. Should have just stayed as an accountant. So I think I think for those of us who are in that sector, we've got to understand that there's a bigger purpose to why we're here rather than the thrill of what happens in markets. In the way that the general community sees us as experts, they aspire to be like us. But that comes with a great deal of accountability and responsibility to those who entrust money to us. So I think there's the unglamorous part of asset management. I think a lot of people think that managing money, running money, is very sexy. You know, it's exciting. You buy and you sell, and people watch all kinds of movies. Wall Street, The Wolf of Wall Street. There's many movies, The Big Short, where they see these hedge fund managers doing a lot of stuff. But a large part of what asset managers do on a day-to-day basis is hard work. They've got to decide what to buy, what to sell. They've got to be informed in doing that. And the decisions they've made have got huge ramifications on people's wealth and institutional wealth, and for that matter, the ability of the country to be able to mobilize savings, which are critical for economic growth and investment. So it's not as sexy as you say. Like right now, I think if you're in asset management, it's a tough space to be in, running money in the environment that you're in. You've had a fantastic 7 or 8 years of tailwind, and all of a sudden, the world has just changed. You're dealing with high inflation, high interest rates, wars, etc. And that on its own is a stressful setup. So I think in the way I see asset managers is that I'm supposed to be the person who is creating the environment for people to deliver on what our customers expect out of them. So I've got to give them the tools, the resources to be able to do so. I've got to create the right environment, the culture, and I've got to be creating the right reward structure that's aligned with the outcomes that they deliver to customers. And within that, there are people who run money and there are people who run the business. In our world at Stanlib, we really separated that there are people whose concern is what are we doing in terms of managing money, and that's why my job is quite clear. I'm not running money, I'm running their business. Okay. There are my colleagues, Giles Higa and Mark Lovett, who are responsible for what's happening on the investment side and also looking at distribution, and then I've got other people who look after the finance and the operations side of Stanlib. In our view, we think that the split is what is relevant, which is why we think in our world to have a CEO who's also directly involved in how money is run would not work in our world. We just think the world is a lot more complex, a lot more demanding. For someone to be solely focused on running money and running the business, we think the two should be split. And it's served as well. It means that my stresses are passed down to the rest of the organization. I don't centralize all of it to me. There are certain things that obviously sit with me, which are, I can't delegate, but there are other things which the people around me are competent of doing better than I can. They're much more competent in running money than I can. I've got other competencies where I'm better, and so when you put us all together, we think we cover the basis of what our customers require in terms of what they've entrusted us, and for that matter, what is required for us to do the role that an institution of our size and scale should actually do. So I think if you're a young person, it's not excessive what you do, what you make it to be. Certainly the ones who have to sit down there and think of billions of rands of money that they run and have to account to that. to customers, because if there's been underperformance or whatever, someone has to go and explain what's gone wrong.
Yeah.
And that on its own is something that I think people underestimate.
Yeah. And thanks for bringing that realism
Yeah.
to it, because we do tend to fall for fashionable, sexy
Yeah.
sounding things without having an appreciation of the responsibility
Yeah.
that they come with. But also really just being honest about the very unsexy parts of it. Like, if you're taking care of ops, that's not very exciting.
No.
It's making sure that the machine starts when you switch it on.
Yeah.
And it processes at the rate that it needs to process, and what comes out on the other end is exactly what should come out, because everything works well. And that's a very critical part of what you do, but it's not just about the managing of the money and investing and divesting. So thank you for that,
Yeah.
Derek. Now, you mentioned something that is also quite important, because it also has a bearing on the conversation we have around transformation. You spoke about the fact that you take care of the monies of orphans and people that are retired.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've heard the debate many times from ourselves and various other people who say asset managers manage our mothers' monies, but they don't invest those monies where our mothers live. There's this huge sense that we should be seeing more of these investments in township areas, in rural areas, where you find a significant number of the people whose money you invest. And I think oftentimes the pushback is, but will we be able to preserve and grow these monies that we are managing? Can we have a conversation around how it is that Stanlib or even some of your colleagues think about the funds that you have, that you're managing, being influential and instrumental in driving transformation in these areas that are seen to be underserved or underinvested in?
Yeah, look, I think that's probably one of the bigger challenges of any market economy, which is that there are sectors that get left behind, that without some form of intervention or some creative thinking, they never get serviced. And so my thinking around that is, one, there are areas which you've got to be clear who's supposed to be doing what.
Yeah.
There are things that the governments, municipalities, etc., are best placed to do. And therefore, we've got to think who's the best implementing agent. If you come and you say to fund managers today, we have got a water problem in Madimole, in Limpopo, I think asset managers would really battle to be able to come up with a solution that's implementable, that's cost effective. But if you capacitate municipalities and you make sure that they've got the right skills and the right financial resource, they can be quite suitable in terms of developing and implementing that. So we've got to be quite clear around when do we want asset manager money to go directly into projects, either building a shopping center, and where do you need to find other agents who are actually much better as conduit to actually implement that. You can have the same debate about housing. There's no point in Stanlib trying to set up its own housing entity when there are National Housing Finance Corporations and a number of these institutions who are actually built and have got the resources to be able to take the money and actually deploy it much better than asset managers. So I think that's always going to be a debate around how far do we go. What I am seeing is that I think the emergence of in understanding the whole idea of ESG, socially responsible investing, etc. South Africa has been way ahead of some of the developed markets, other than the Scandinavians and the Dutch. Certainly, if you look at the Americans and the Europeans outside of those Scandinavian countries, we've made a lot more progress in terms of getting the thinking right and mobilizing some capital, but quite clearly not enough capital is going to actually deal with some of those issues, because some of them are just intractable issues in my view. They will require a multi-decade approach to get it right. So I think some of the skills that we are applying as fund managers is saying, well, what are the priority goals that we should be solving for? Is it healthcare? Is it housing? Is it water? Is it electricity? Because we've got to be quite narrow in what we are aiming for. Because if you go this wide, you end up with bits and pieces of money going into areas which are not going to have an impact. You need probably a narrower focus, with much more deeper expertise and deeper resources being deployed into those narrow focus areas. Unfortunately, if you look at all the development goals that we've set for ourselves, probably 7, they're all very big, whether it's healthcare or housing or water, they're just huge. And I don't think there's enough agreement on which are the ones that require us, which is the one that will have the most impact.
Yeah.
And therefore, which is the one that should then be prioritized from a resourcing point of view. And that's going to always be a debate. The other thing is, I've been involved with socially responsible investing since I started my career when I was at Old Mutual. We got involved with Community Growth Fund, et cetera, et cetera. What is interesting is that in some instances, and we need to talk about this because it's very interesting in that I used to sit down and present to trade unions, and they would argue, no, we really think we should invest in housing. And you say, okay, guys, how much of your money is going to housing? No. Other people must put their money into housing. So even that, amongst us as people who are influential, we can't say we want money to go into township, but it's other people's money. We should be saying, well, we're going to take a portion of what we are responsible for and have skin in the game and lead that.
Are we having those conversations though, Derek? Because I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
You can't solve all our social problems. We shouldn't even expect you to do that. It's not your role per se. But I think you invest where there's opportunity.
Yeah.
And typically opportunity is also informed by what are the key characteristics that you need to see present in a situation for there to be a compelling investment case for you to do. Are we having those conversations with the right people? Is there a conversation that we should be facilitating to say, well, as asset managers, this needs to be true for us to come in, so that we then know who the parties are that we need to be bringing around that table to have the conversation so that we can start driving capital in the areas that we are saying it is required but is not receiving sufficient.
Look, Amanda, the challenge in South Africa now is that in some instances we're talking past each other. In that if we sit down and you say in some of these areas there has to be some form of a blended capital approach, which is who will take first loss, and there has to be a moderation of expected return from those who are looking for a market-related return. And we're missing each other in terms of that conversation. I just think that we all, from a fund manager point of view, we are very good at articulating the risk and why the return has to be commensurate with the risk. I don't think we are good at articulating what the risk mitigants could be and engaging with the people who actually at times want to have some form of risk mitigation funding that could go into some of those projects. Because some of them over a period of time, once you've tested them on a pilot basis, you can roll them out on a much more aggressive basis because you've proven that there's a model that works. So I'm more interested in saying what are the proof of concepts that we should be having amongst ourselves and saying, look, let's take a particular project or area, let's say, I don't know, housing, and say, well, we've got a housing challenge. Let's go to NHFC as the implementing agents. Let's get the debt funders or the equity funders. Let's see if there's an opportunity to put some first loss. Get those people and say, okay, there's 5,000 houses that need to be built in a particular area. Let's go for the next year or so, try and execute on that. And if it works, then we've got a model that works. A lot of these things, you've got to try them and understand that everybody needs to be willing to say, well, it's small enough that it's not going to cause such a big loss, but we're willing to try it because if it works, well, great. If it doesn't work, we go back to the drawing board.
It makes a lot of sense to me, but then you are probably right that we are not having the right conversations with the right people, or as you put it, we are talking past each other. And the question is, who's going to then be the person who sits in the middle and brings the parties together, and we agree that we're going to do a POC, and if this is true, then you are able to attract funds from yourselves, or at least we can leverage some of the capital that would be.
Look, I mean, there are industry bodies which have tried. I see some, I think ABSIP is an important. I mean, I don't want to punt ABSIP here, but I really think that institutions, I mean, the reason why when ABSIP was struggling, I still say to Stanlib, continue to support it, is because, the failure of a society starts with the failure of its institutions. And even bodies like ABSIP have got a critical role as part of civil society to make sure that the goals and objectives of what a constitutional democracy looks like have to be fulfilled. And so I think you got to, when you think as an ABSIP agenda, you got to decide what really are the things that matter, that ABSIP is willing to spear, and what are the things that are not going to be part of ABSIP's agenda. And who do you then get around the table amongst the industry players to mobilize some of that? And South Africa is very fortunate in that when the industry bodies have put their hearts and mind to something, they make things happen. In fact, whether it's BASA or BUSA, or what they call themselves, Banking Association, or ASISA and whatever, there's massive resources sitting in those institutions. The question is that, are we unlocking them on the right agenda points that require us to that are going to make the biggest difference?
Do you think that there's merit, though, in, we spoke earlier about diversity and inclusion and transformation. And there's a view that once you have, firstly, diversity in terms of, racial profile and gender and religion and all of those other things, by virtue of having a diversity of views in the room, we could come up with very different views of where opportunity lies in terms of investment and where it doesn't lie. There's a view that we might still not have the right people in the, around the table, or we might still not have enough diversity around the table, which could potentially identify opportunity where traditionally we've not seen opportunity to invest. What are your views on that?
Look, I mean, we all know that the fact that you went to UCT, you studied business science, USCA, you went to Deloitte or Ernst & Young, there is a certain degree of thinking that permeates. And so if you're really serious about opening your world to different views, you've got to reconsider who you hire and where you find them. And that is a slow process. There's no doubt that the domination of particular training and institutions and degrees has got a particular impact on how people show up in the workplace. And so, the fact that asset management has been dominated by CAs means that, all we talk about is about risk. We've all written the same exams. We've been taught by the same professors that taught whoever is hiring us. So there's a degree of inward thinking that permeates us. So we've got to be very open, and that's where the challenge is today. Is that I'm very comfortable with people who look like me. And so when I'm looking, I'm more inclined to sort of gravitate towards people who look like me, who've got the same training, who do things that are very similar to me. To assimilate people who are different to us is a challenge, one. And then secondly, we have to create the workplace where people who are different to us feel that they can be themselves. You see, when we started in asset management, we had to conform. And when I started at Old Mutual in '96, as much as they gave me latitude to express myself, but there was a clear way of how you needed to show up and what you needed to put up with. And over time, we've learned that has been a limitation in that we haven't really seen the whole human being. People have not been able to bring the whole of themselves to the workplace. They've only shown us a part of it, which is a part that conforms with what we want to see. And I think we've lost a lot in not people being themselves, whether it's black people, women, gay people, etc. All of those people were never allowed to really be truly be themselves.
We've achieved diversity, but we have not achieved inclusion.
It's interesting. I would say that I think inclusion is when people who are traditionally not part of what is considered the mainstream get more represented. You see some change, but it is slow because changing institutions is a lot slower than engaging with an individual, because institutions have got a culture, they've got behaviors which have been responsible for success or failure, and a lot of those behaviors are well ingrained. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember talking to someone who's a cultural expert, and I was saying, yeah, you know, we're working at how we can change culture at Stanlib. And he says, you've just chosen the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
Because culture is one of the most difficult things to change, particularly in organizations which have been established. If you're starting today, on day one with a clean slate, is different. But if you've got a way of a 22-year-old, a 25-year-old institution, that's got a way of how it's run. To change that is a very slow process. And that's where we are. I mean, every black CEO of an asset manager is grappling with this issue, which is, guys, how quickly can you change the culture? And can you really be successful in doing it?
I mean, it's the nub of the issue. In fact, when we did a series about 18 months or 24 months ago, I can't remember exactly, on transformation, we were saying every company in the financial services sector today is either a level 1 BBB contributor or 2 or 3, but it still doesn't feel like we are home, right? It still doesn't feel like we are represented as, say, Africans. You walk into Liberty and I even change my accent when I get here. You know, and today I normally wear my African print and let me wear my European
We want you to bring your whole self when you come here.
I don't want them to look down on me. You know, and that's just the reality of it. And you also, so you find that there are very many black people now. I always say we flooded the sector with black faces and to a large extent women. But it still doesn't feel like it's home. And I'm using home quite deliberately. And what we have found from the conversations we're having with our members is that we still struggle with imposter syndrome. We still feel like we need to fit in and belong and assimilate. And it feels that the next frontier for transformation is the issue around what I termed inclusion. You know, making sure that when we walk into the space, it feels like I've got the freedom to, as you say, bring all of myself here as I am, you know, in my African print, if that's what I want to do, and nobody's going to think, oh my goodness, she's so colorful. But I will be embraced as I am, because it is once we reach that level that our full creativity and innovation, I think, gets unlocked. And I was quite interested in, I actually liked the language that Nancy was using earlier when she was talking about your transformation journey, because I think that is the next frontier. Derek, you've been around since the first charter in 2003. You have seen many BE transactions, you've seen many programs that are being implemented around employment equity and things like that. But you are now, from a transformation perspective, would you agree that we are now faced with the biggest challenge of this transformation project, which is now that we've got the people in, how do we change the institutions so that they're reflective of the people and they're responsive to the needs?
Yeah, look, I think the BE scorecard was a very interesting tool. But I think what you quickly learn is that, and it's interesting what's happening in asset management in particular, because essentially most of the asset managers move quite quickly to be a level 1, level 2, or level 3. So if you look at the top 5 managers in the country, I think the worst one is a level 3, but all of them, most of the others are 2 or 1. Because large institutions have got the resources to marshal, to say, okay, this is what matters in terms of we need to be rated a particular way. What do we need to do to get there? And I think that was a meaningful headline story to say, okay, we've achieved that. I think the underlying issue that we need to deal with now is quite clearly the people component. And the people component to me is not so much about the distribution of talent, is more about the distribution of opportunity, which is that talent is quite widely distributed, but opportunity is not. And therefore, one needs to figure out about how do you then open the opportunity set to be as wide as what is the talent pool is available. And that is the challenge, which is, okay, once you've got how do people access the opportunity to be part of the change that we need in institutions.
But why is that a challenge?
One is how do if you are part of, so I was fortunate. I studied business science at UCT. I was very much interested in investments. The person who was lecturing us ended up being the head of asset management at Old Mutual, and I could send him an email, a letter, and say, Professor Hopkins, I've graduated, I'd like to come and start. Now, I had a bit of an inside track there. He knew me, I was a student. Now, not many people know that.
So it's a network thing.
It's part networking, but it's part of, those days, if you studied business science at UCT, you were very lucky. You were almost guaranteed that if you wanted to get into asset management in South Africa, in Cape Town, you would, because there was a bias towards that. Now, if you started something else, engineering, you either need to have done an MBA to be considered to be worth it to go into asset management. And if you started BA, you were lucky if you got into the back office, because it was like, what do BA people do in asset management? They might have potential, but if you studied philosophy and politics and economics, the economics was what interested you, but the politics and the philosophy was, well, you'll never learn. You just don't understand financial markets with that. So I think there were some of those biases, which to some degree, even today, it's still not. If you don't have a business degree, whatever we describe as a business degree, your chances of getting into asset management are the shape of a donut.
Okay. Wow. But I'm actually, I must say that I'm quite, I'm happy to hear a leader who acknowledges that, because I don't know how many of us actually acknowledge that there are biases that we carry for various reasons that continue to perpetuate a certain way of thinking and of doing things, and that's what retains the barriers. But I think if, as a leader, you are conscious, as you sound like you are conscious, even if you have that bias, your consciousness means that if somebody calls you out, you'll be more willing and receptive to their criticism of how you see things and how you do things, and hopefully it means that you will change how you make a decision, for instance.
Yeah, look, it's running these asset managers or these big businesses. You live in a fishbowl, because everybody can see what you do. So everybody is constantly watching how you're going to respond to this. How are you going to respond to a request? Are you really true to the values that you say? And so people watch a lot what you do rather than what you say. And they're constantly looking, okay, you said this, is they doing complementing with that? So you probably, if you're surrounded by people who are honest enough to call you out, it helps you, keeps you honest, because they will call you out where you are, sort of deviating from what you certainly stated as your intention. And hopefully, if you've created a culture of openness and willingness to give and receive feedback, people help you to get better. And some of it is the fact that some of us started in this industry when feedback was brutal. When I started in asset management at Old Mutual, you had somebody assigned to you, and you used to write investment reports, and you needed to print it, and the person would sit there with the red pen and then mark it.
Yeah, like in articles.
Like in articles where they do the review of the audit papers. And I don't think today the sort of feedback that we received would be received well by the current generation, because for us it was like, you couldn't, the person would start, if it was, say, a 5-page investment report that got to slide 3, and you couldn't reckon to page 3, and the rest of the 2 pages, they just gave up because it was so hopeless. And they would tell you, look, I didn't even finish this, then go and redo it. And that was feedback. Today, if you did that, some of the people you would need to, either HR would jump up on you, or you would need to have a mental wellness session to deal with that person, because the feedback has just been so brutal. But I think for us at that point in time, and maybe that's where we miss in where we're doing a lot of people a disservice, is that we've not generated enough goodwill with the people that we're giving feedback to say, actually, we are all invested in getting better. Okay? We are all doing this thing because we really want to show what excellence looks like. That writing a report that is poor doesn't do your reputation as a young analyst any good. And so my job here is to make sure that you understand what good looks like and that you strive to actually be that. But I think that the environment that we've created now makes it quite tricky to give that sort of honest feedback. And you've got to create a culture where as much as people might find the feedback hard, but the actual value from where it comes from, which is the intention is to make me a better person and to make me better.
So we have to become coaches now as leaders.
Yeah, you gotta be a coach, you gotta be a mentor, you gotta be open to feedback yourself, and you gotta be willing to understand the world where people are at. People bring, if you want people to bring themselves, all of themselves into the workplace, you've got to be very much interested in the human being as a whole. And for someone like me, who is an intensely private person and someone who people struggle to connect with, it's a challenge to make people feel like they can open up. And so you've got to surround yourself with people who help you to understand that actually the way you're showing up here doesn't help your brand and the individual that you're working with.
Let's take away your BE level status as Stanlib.
Yeah.
And we now are setting new KPIs for Derek, and we were saying this is how we're going to judge you. How should we judge you when it comes to transformation next year and the year after and the year after?
Look, I think the biggest thing for us is how do you change the workforce? We all know that in the industry at the moment, the issue of women, particularly black women, is a huge challenge. It's very interesting in that when I started in the industry, there's quite a few CEO asset managers now who have got black CEOs. There's one or two smaller ones who have got women CEOs, but there's been progress in terms of black men ascending to leading that. I think we've got to figure out what we're going to do about getting women to move into those roles firstly. And so I think the women issue is going to be one of the things that we've got to be grappling with. And so my view would be, one, what are the women at Stanlib saying about the progress? Do they feel that we are making progress? It might not be leaps and bounds, but certainly do they feel heard? Do they feel that there are discernible actions on the issues that trouble them? And do they feel that there's movement on those issues that trouble them? It's not good enough to just have action that's not moving forward. So I think that would be the first one. I think the second one would be how we run money. How much of the money that we are running is actually going into areas which have previously been neglected? How are impact funds actually doing? Are they having the impact that we want them to have in terms of not just the investment return outcome, but also the other goals that we have set for them? I think the third one would be, what is our level of engagement with the subject? Are we seen as if you want to have a robust debate, talk to the guys at Stanlib, or please don't even bother to talk to them because they're like in the dark ages, so they're not interested. I think for the size of institution that we are, we've got to be engaged. It's just one of those things of being a large institution, is that it imposes responsibilities on you that others don't have. Because you are seen as having the resources to be able to do that. And you are very concerned about the health of the industry, because if the industry sneezes, you are the first person to catch a cold. So you're a lot more invested in the health of where the industry should be going. And so to me, those are the three areas that I would say we would like to be visible, in that order.
Can I add number 4?
Okay, all right.
HR is in the room. We're contracting you.
Yeah, we're already having a performance contracting discussion, but that's fine. That's fine. At least my chairman is not here.
This is recorded. Yes. Can we be intentional, Derek, with recruiting from universities other than UCT and VETS? And you can, by the way, because you're already funding these students. The money that I was bragging about we are receiving from Stanlib, we are actually specifically targeting previously back universities.
Yeah, look, we certainly can. I am very concerned, though, that I think those institutions need to have a much more aggressive engagement with future employers around what the needs of future employers is. What should we be doing to enable those kids to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the child who's been to UCT? I think at times when they come, there is a big difference to someone who's has been coached, etc., to someone who they walk in there, they're just absolutely just gobsmacked about, even just they're walking into the lobby, they're already feeling nervous just by that, before you even get into, okay, tell us about why you want to work here, etc., etc. So I think there's a lot more that needs to be done, and I would say that in those areas we would need to help those potential candidates. How do you prepare for an interview? It sounds basic. We were very lucky, when we started in asset management. There were, other sources we had. We'd been to UCT. There were people who could tell us, look, this is how you look like in an interview. You sit up straight. You listen. You let the other person not that you don't interrupt them. You sound confident. If you don't know, you tell them you don't know, etc., etc. So we were coached. But I think there's a bit of prep work that is required for people on how they should show up.
So what you're saying to me is that the phone call I'm making to Nancy tomorrow about additional funding should then include a coaching component for the bazaars. Thank you.
I think, well, it's very interesting. So I was involved for many years. I was involved with the CEDA Eden Trust. And some of the stuff we used to do with the Eden Trust was exactly that. Which is, how do you show up? You're going to go now do an interview at PwC for articles. Are you just going to rock up there looking like you were up the whole night the night before? Or are you going to get there looking like someone who is wanting to be an accountant, a chartered accountant? And we used to do that for those children, and we need to be doing that for people. I think we underestimate at times how people show up, how critical it is whether they get hired or not. I don't know how many times I've had situations where people really look good on paper, and you go through the interview process and they just bomb out. And you're like, but on paper, this person really stands out. But when you start engaging with them, they just never live up to what's on paper. And some of it is just they're nervous, they're not confident about themselves, they didn't anticipate some of the questions, etc., etc. And we need to sort of make sure that they are at an equal footing, rather than being disadvantaged by the fact that they are underprepared for that.
No, and we take it for granted, actually, that if you get an interview, then, if you get invited to an interview, you should know what to do, and people really don't know how to do that. So we need to be intentional about that. Thank you very much for agreeing to KPI number 4. We will be back here next year this time to check on how we're doing. I think it's important. And I think, our responsibility, of course, also is to support, and I don't know how, I was saying in jest, but maybe that's actually the answer, that we take what we do on the bursary fund beyond just paying for academic, for tuition and things like that, but actually think about having a much more holistic.
Look, I think we're going to think about that we've got to prepare the bursary holders for what awaits them in corporate. So we were, again, we who trained as accountants, we were very fortunate in that because we had either bursaries or scholarships from the firms that sponsored us, we had to do work. So by the time we got there, we sort of had a feel about the drill and whatever. The culture, we knew who the managers were, etc., etc. I think we're going to be doing the same thing with people. And funny enough, the actuarial society has been very good in that. In that your typical actuary, whether they're at Old Mutual or Liberty, etc., as part of their work, they really get introduced into the workplace. By the time they finish, they are well known. They're not like walking in there and saying, "Oh, who is this person who is walking in here?" And so I would say that for certainly for a bursary fund like what ABSIP is running, we should be in, whether we insist or whatever, we should be mapping a lot of those bursary holders to say, during school holidays or whatever, they've got an opportunity to go and work and be sitting with someone who, in the future, they're going to be working with, so that they learn how to conduct themselves. They know what's required in the workplace and how they should show up.
No, absolutely. And I think it's something that we will definitely work on. I'm not saying it in just now. It's actually a very important thing for us to apply our minds to. How do we do it?
We've got to be encouraging all our sponsors to move away to move beyond just writing a check.
Being actively involved.
I think writing a check is if you ask people for a donation, it's not too difficult to write a check and say, here it is, go and do whatever you want to do. But when I say, okay, I want you to put a bit more time into it, that's when you realize, okay, who is doing these things to assuage their guilt and to quickly tick a box that says, I've spent X amount. Who's really interested in the development of that individual. And I think we've got to be having that part, which is, even ABSIP, you should be saying, well, we want you to write a check, but we certainly want you to, in VAC work, these 3 people are going to be coming to your place in December. Please make sure that you've got a way of how they're going to be there as part of your commitment.
Great. Thank you. Have you got any questions for me?
No, I wasn't. I'm always very nervous about this thing, because there's always. I'm sure when you get to the online questions or questions from the floor here, I will struggle with some of them. But it's fine. We're all having a conversation. I don't have all the answers, but certainly I'm willing to venture what my opinions are.
No, brilliant. Thank you so much, Derek. I think, Kaya, have you got questions from Brilliant?
Personally, I have a few questions, but apparently I must defer to the floor first. So are there any questions from the floor? There is a mic that is moving around. You can say going once, going twice. That threat of wine was a joke, guys. You're free to ask the questions. You're still going to get the wine. Yes, sir.
Derek, you've been involved in the transformation, I think, right from the beginning. What is your view about why the industry battles with management control, especially with the talent that we have in the industry? It's not like we don't have the talent that we have. And in some cases, you see that institutions are actually going back. I think the last report actually reflects that. Companies that had black CEOs, now they have white CEOs. And it's normal, it's happening.
Look, I think the first thing is getting to run some of these, to be an exec in some of these, particularly the big institutions, takes time. You've got to be willing to do time in order to get to where you want to be. Whether it's head of Standard Bank or whoever, we all sort of got to keep giving ourselves 5-10 years of hard graft. I mean, Peter Wundler wrote a book which is Doing Time. And so that's one issue, which is we've got to allow people to really grow so that they can be able to, and with the right support, so that they've experienced different challenges in different environments in their lives. I mean, if you've been a CEO in asset management sort of like prior to end of last year for 4 or 5 years, you actually had a very good run. You know, markets were running. You look like a hero. Now it's all testing all of us because markets are not running. Alpha is hard to come by. Flows are tepid. Now you've got to go and fight. And that's the sort of time where you really mature. Because now you are dealing with things which are not outside of your control, the things that you should be driving as a CEO. So there's one which is we've got to allow people to do time. The second one is I don't know how many people really, I think people aspire to be senior portfolio managers. I don't know how many people really aspire to be CEOs of asset managers. Because if you really understand the job well, you know that it's probably not the sexiest job. You'd actually rather be either a direct report, a COO, or a head of investments than dealing with the stuff that CEOs deal with. And I think the smart people are realizing that actually you can get paid a hell of a lot more money and sleep peacefully at night, not being CEO rather than being CEO. So I think there are some people who are, from a career point of view, are saying, well, maybe that particular trajectory is not for me. The third one is really whether the institutions and the boards consider that to be important. People don't appoint themselves to be CEO. You do need to look at the board, and it's very interesting, the Prudential Authority on the banks came up with a discussion about succession. To say who really are the successors of all of the CEOs in this big four big banks. Interesting to have the same discussion in asset management and saying, Derek, if tomorrow you decided you've done your 6 years at Stanlib, you now want to go and become a missionary in wherever, are you sure that you've got succession? So I think there's a problem, which is the depth of the succession and the robustness of the succession plans is not there. And I don't think the boards are engaged with that. To say, look, we know that over the next 3 years, if this one is not here, this one's going to take over.
My question was exactly that is the problem. And my understanding is the boards themselves, I think, are not doing justice to the institutions themselves, because you would have thought that would be a key performance area for them as a board.
Now, they've never, well, I mean, to a different degree, this is not an issue that's just about transformation. It's just that there's been just poor succession planning, period. I mean, there used to be a big debate when I was a young guy on SAB, and people used to say, why is SAB such a great company? Because SAB just had an amazing way of how it groomed its people. So it doesn't matter whether you were black or white. By the time you got to the issues of transformation, they had a play model that worked very well for them. I suppose Standard Bank, some people would say the same thing about them. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that thing is poor in any event. And by the time you get to dealing with the transformation dimension, if they don't have that game plan for succession in general, transformation is a non-starter. They'll never get it right.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the floor? So, Derek, I heard you mention that you might be a missionary. I'm hoping you'll start with the presidency job before you head to that one. You said we must talk succession planning, so clearly that's me talking about succession planning. So I'm going to go through some of the questions that we received from the online platform. I'll sort of read quite a few of them so you can sort of deliberate them collectively. The first one is actually not a question, it's a comment that talks about how the partnership between ABSIP and Stanlib has been structured in terms of the bursary fund. It actually offers psychosocial support to the students that are part of it, because I think everybody who sits around and deliberates about that bursary fund actually understands what we're trying to achieve, and that's why it achieved the success rates that it has achieved so far. I don't know if that gets us another 500,000 or so, but I tried my best. So you're going to have to do more selling. So thank you very much for that. So the first question was, what are the 2 or 3 new ideas in the industry that excite you? And that's a question from Don Andrews. The other one was,
Don.
what is the ultimate ingredient for your self-discipline, considering how far you've come up to this point, if I may kindly ask? That is from Zandile Mdwam. And the third one that we'll take for now is that, how does Stanlib handle investment risk, learning from COVID-19 and economic issues such as load shedding and slow economic growth and, that lack of succession planning thing, and while still also pursuing investment returns?
Yeah, okay, let me start with question 2. I'll come back to Don's question. Look, I was raised by my mother, largely, and I only met my dad when I was 33 for the first time. And my mother is a strong Christian, and so she instilled a very strong Protestant work ethic in me. And so I was never really afraid of hard work. And that has stood me in good stead, because in the places that I have worked, the thing that's helped me the most has been, I just had this ability to get things done. And people value that you just get things done. At times I complained, but getting things done gets you noticed, gets people to understand what you are capable of, and gets you opportunities to do more. And so I think there's one issue, which is the way I was raised. The second thing is, over the years, I've worked with and I've worked for people who've been demanding on me as an individual. Right from high school, people might know there's a lady called Tandi Nzimande. She was head of the Solidarity Fund.
She still is, I think.
Yeah, her mother was my headmistress. And when I was in that difficult stage of transitioning to teenage years, where boys really go off the rail, for some reason she just decided she would take a keen interest in me, and she was incredibly hard on me. She demanded, even I used to think that she hated me, because she would never be satisfied with anything I did. She was always like, you're capable of more. And she pushed me. And when I got to Old Mutual, it was the same issue, which was you push. And then over the years, I've worked with colleagues who bring their A game all the time. And just keeping up with them means that you've got to be pushing yourself as well. And then in terms of personal discipline, I don't really have many other things that I do. So I'm married to one wife. No, got to clarify. This is Joburg. People have got wives and, into us a kwapeni.
Small house.
Smaller, yeah. Okay, so I've got one wife, I've got 4 children, so I'm a husband and a father. I read. I use running to relax. And that's really I've got 1 or 2 community things I'm involved in. So I don't really have a cluttered life. My life is sort of quite neatly packaged, and therefore I choose the things I get involved in, and I only choose things that I think I can stick with. So that's the discipline one. I think the first question from Don was on. Just read again.
2 or 3
2 or 3 industry ideas that excite you.
Look, I think I start from having a somber view, which is that the industry is, for the next 2-3 years, I think it's going to have more headwinds than tailwinds. And so the first thing that it needs is, I think it's still one of the industries that attracts lots of talent. The reason I wake up every morning and come to work is that you just work with people who are phenomenally talented, bring out the best in you, challenge you, and teach you things that you probably would not have learned if you haven't had an interaction with them. So I remain excited about the opportunity in the industry to attract people and to keep people. I remain excited about the opportunity in the industry to have a global perspective. South Africa has always been competitive as an asset management world, but I think the fact that we are getting a lot more money going offshore, people have got an opportunity to really think in an expansive way. I'm sure we're going to get lots of international parties wanting to come and have a foothold in South Africa, and that will create a great deal of learning opportunities for people. The third one is that we play a critical role in terms of mobilizing savings. And when it comes to solving some of the big problems in South Africa, there is no ways that the energy crisis in South Africa is going to be solved without the involvement of the asset management industry. Because, you need to mobilize capital. And I'm very excited about solving intractable problems. And I think our role as an industry in putting capital to work in the shortest time possible is going to be one of the things that will make this a much better country than it's ever been.
All right. So the next question comes from me personally. So, obviously, over the past 20 years, I'm sure there's been a moment at Polyshorts or Drummond where like, actually, I've achieved everything I need in life. Can't I just get into a car and drive straight to Pietermaritzburg? So I want to know what keeps you driving, doing the Comrades Marathon. Yeah, that's just a point of curiosity. But is that reflective of that type of sense of patience and the drive and the ambition that says, no matter how long and how difficult the task appears, I want to try it?
Look, guys, when I grew up, I was told that you cannot avoid hard things. And over the years, people that I've worked with have been very strong in impressing upon me that you got to do hard things in life if you're going to get anywhere. You got to do the things that take you out of your comfort zone and create a certain degree of discomfort. And I found this thing, and each year it's become a bit of a pilgrimage where I sort of have an opportunity to test myself. And it's sort of, and I'm trying not to make sure that it doesn't define me, because one day I won't be able to do it. So I don't want to sort of have comrades defining who I am. But certainly some of the qualities that it brings out, which is the patience, the endurance, the ability to go the long haul, are things that we need in our personal lives. And certainly for those of us who are running businesses, you've got to have a long-term perspective. And you've got to know that there are some instances where you've got to grind it out. And as I said, for me, for the next 2 years or so in asset management, it's going to be a grind. And if you don't have the stamina to sort of keep grinding away, you're more likely going to give up. And by the time the industry turns and the opportunity comes back, you won't be ready for it.
Follow-up question. It says, what are the levers that you've pulled to influence or create an enabling organizational culture in the companies that you have led? And another very difficult one, so I don't know if you want to run away now or later. I'll just blame load shedding. What is Stanlib doing in making sure that the majority of the funds and your asset under management are just over 600 billion rand? It's making sure the majority of these funds are led by the transformation representatives. This, in a way, will encourage inclusivity and knowing professionals are being transformed at the right spaces. I'm asking this because investment companies have a lot of transformation candidates in the middle management, but they're not leading. They tend to find that plateau somewhere in there. And then the last question for this moment is from Ayanda. Does Stanlib have an accelerator secondment program for young upcoming professionals in the industry, perhaps particularly aimed at those from underrepresented backgrounds?
Yeah, look, let's deal with the elephant in the room. Who's running money? Because that to me is the next issue that is going to be focused. Look, in order to run money, people must do time. We are very fortunate in that because of the nature of Stanlib's investment portfolio, it's got a very big fixed income book, and that fixed income team is probably the most transformed in the industry. So I'm not worried about fixed income. I think however way you slice and dice that team, it's an epitome of what I would like most of Stanlib to look like. But we're not there, okay? They've got other franchises which it's going to take us easily the next 5-6 years to get to a point where potentially we've got someone who could be a lead in some of those franchises. But I think on the bulk of the assets that we run, I'm reasonably comfortable that there is enough visibility around what is the depth of the challenge, and I do not underestimate that in some of our franchises we've got a big challenge in terms of just the number and the level of skill that is required in the existing team, unless we parachute someone from outside to come into that. And we are not convinced that that's necessarily a viable strategy for us in what we have at the moment. We would rather be working and growing our own timber in the areas where we are lagging. And people can see that the areas in Stanlib where we are lagging. But we accept those, and we accept that as a challenge around. Don't judge us now. Look at what our 3-year plan or 5-year plan looks like. If in 3 years' time we look the way that we still do, then there is a problem. So I'm comfortable that there is a plan. I'm more willing to put my head on the block to say that judge us on the execution of the plan rather than what we look like right now. We don't have an accelerated program. We have got a program where we identify people, they come into the organization, they work their way through it. I wouldn't call it as accelerated. I also think that in asset management, it's quite interesting in that if you are a bond, or let's say you're an equity analyst, what is an accelerated career looks like for you? Because you've got to analyze shares. One day you might end up running money. After you run money, maybe you decide you want to go onto the general stream. Maybe you can be chief investment officer, or you could go into the general stream where you end up being CEO or whatever. So some of those, when you talk about acceleration, is not the same as what you have in the class of program at RMB, where you come in and you move around. Here, you probably choose an asset class, and you've got to do your time in terms of getting the exposure that you need, and hopefully you can get a way of what is the fastest way of learning, and what is the fastest way of getting to, say, being allowed to run money as a way of accelerating. But those accelerated programs in specialist fields like asset management, particularly if you're running money, it gets quite very interesting. Because if you're running infrastructure, you're an infrastructure analyst, it's unlikely that you one day end up being an absolute return person.
The last set of questions are about people, those elephants in the room. So the first one says that people are very complex, but are central in the asset management space. What is your style or advice for dealing with difficult situations with people? So not the difficult person on stage, but generally other difficult people. The first one is on the risks that people face. The impact technology will have on the future of the industry is well documented. What are the key skills that you believe young people should build on to ensure they remain relevant, especially for analysts, but also for other roles that make up the broader asset management space? So those questions are from Leanda Mohatle. The last one is quite important. It says, if you could have dinner with any 3 people, dead or alive, who would it be and why? And there's a proviso. It cannot be me. I'm busy. Polo is going home. You've already sitting with her, and would prefer you go for the ones who are alive rather than the ones who are dead, so that perhaps there can be a follow-up session where there's a dinner. So those are the 3 questions. And the last one is, how is Stanlib contributing to addressing the shortage of housing in the country? Good.
Yeah, look, on the housing side, we've got an impact fund where we're mobilizing capital to go into that. We don't believe that we should be going and building houses ourselves. I think there are many institutions, whether it's NHFC or TEF or entrepreneurs, etc., who are best suited to be supported in terms of our impact fund. So that's the short answer to that. Who would I have for dinner? 3 people. I think the first one would be Barack Obama. I've read his book. I found him quite fascinating in terms of his mission, of how he wanted to create a different United States of America. And it just reminded me of what a contrast it was between him and Trump. Trump basically undid a lot of the things that Obama was trying to do. So I would love to have that with him. I'll be very interested in having dinner with Thabo Mbeki. And then the other person is is a superb sportsman who, when I was a student, I used to have him on my wall. Although I'm not a basketball player, I've always been fascinated about Michael Jordan because he just epitomized excellence in even today. Long after he's retired, we're still walking around wearing Jordan shoes. Just the longevity, etc. So that would be the three people I'd like to have dinner with. And then there was a question on, just remind me the questions, please, Kaya.
People.
There was one
I
on...
think the risks that people face with AI technologies and all of that.
Yeah, look, I think, so there's very interesting, if I look at our own business, our own business is changing where a lot of the activities that are not considered core to investments, we are outsourcing those to other players who do that and creating careers for people who want to pursue that. And unfortunately, in a lot of those areas, there's massive automation that's actually taking place. So a lot of those people need to be reskilled. And my view would be, if you ask me what are the skills that you need to learn, these are the skills that a computer can't do. So ability to think, ability to see patterns, and ability to connect different ideas. And a computer can't do that. It can enable you to see the patterns, but it won't be able to actually enable you to put it together. So the sort of thinking skills, etc. Those are the skills that we probably used to underestimate. But with automation, that's one. And the second thing is, I think we all need to be embracing whatever artificial intelligence or chat GPT or whatever it is, because I think it's going to make our lives a lot more interesting in that the manual stuff we won't have to do, because it's going to be better for them to do that. We'll only do the stuff that only humans can do. And so I would say embrace some of those things. I'm sitting there with my sons and getting to understand, what can ChatGPT do? Can it help me to write my CEO report so that I can go and play with them? So I think there's a lot of opportunity that's in there. I don't think we should be scared. If you look at what technology, different types of technology, not sort of IT, but in the 15th, 16th century, people were getting exposure to the Iron Age. And the people who survived and became prosperous were the ones who embraced the tools that were available. They were artisans, but they were using the tools to become better at what they did as artisans. And we could have do the same thing. We could have embraced the tools, and that enabled us to be a lot more productive in the areas that we're in. However, there are jobs that are going to disappear. I think your typical administrative function that involves processing, if that doesn't go because of ChatGPT, it's already going because it's being shipped to India or to Poland or any other place where people are doing it cheaper. And in South Africa, we have shown that we cannot be competitive in those jobs. So I think there's a certain amount of carnage that's coming in some of those jobs, unfortunately. So I would think that on the investment side, generally some disruption, but I think people who are working in middle and back office are really worried about their careers because the changes that are coming in those areas are fast, and then almost every major asset manager is looking at how they become efficient. And a lot of the efficiency is more around how do we deploy technology, certainly to augment people, but a lot of the technology means that you're not going to see a big headcount increase in some of those functions in asset management.
Sure. Definitely going to be some casualties. I've just received another message that says, apparently I'm stopping everyone from having their wine. It doesn't have a name, so I think it's someone who's actually inside here, because the people at home shouldn't be telling me that. So yes, I do understand. So yeah, on that note, I think we can close off. And I think I'd like to obviously do the things in reverse and introduce the president of ABSIP. And the reason we have to introduce the president of ABSIP is that the next time when she hosts the next CEO roundtable, then we won't have the time to introduce her, then she can just slide into the conversation. So leteka-radebe runs IDF Capital, and she is up here on Tricker Road, so you can visit her if you need money. Hoping she's going to be deploying capital, and maybe to the housing, as some people asked. But yeah, you can have that conversation with her. So thank you very much, Polo, for having joined us. Thank you very much, Derek, for obviously being a wonderful guest. A round of applause for the two of them. And thank you again to the Stanlib team that put this together and got us here, especially the graphics people, because the graphics always generate a level of interest, don't they? I think we have like over 200 people that have signed up today. So that indicates that people like seeing the things that they do. And then because I am deployed here, I cannot have the final word. So thank you very much. And I'm going to hand it over to Paulo to say a final goodbye. And then we can do the wine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaya. I actually wanted to, before we close, the question around what technology is going to do to jobs. I think the reality is that we probably need to start retooling and reskilling ourselves. And maybe the question should be, what is big corporate doing to help people to retool and reskill? Because when you look at, I invest in technology, I run a VC fund, so this is something I spend a lot of time looking at. And where new jobs are coming in technology skills, whether it is cybersecurity, whether it is computer science, whether it is coding, programming, software engineering, and all of those things. And then what we have found is that retooling yourself to be digitally savvy actually doesn't take as long as we tend to think. Unless, of course, you want to become a computer scientist. I don't think everybody wants to be a computer scientist, but certainly things like programming and coding seem to be easier skills to gain, and they have utility across very many sectors. So I think that people should not despair. I think we should just be proactive and retool ourselves. But thank you so much, Derek, for this talk. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. Did we achieve what we wanted to achieve? I think, firstly, we came out with a KPI contract. So the HR people don't have much work to do. So you can reduce their salaries for the month of July and just maybe donate the difference to... Because I know that getting into a KPI discussion with a CEO of a company normally takes very many iterations and debates. So we've cut out all of that time. The people now know you. They know that, you have only one wife. And you, from time to time, do crazy things like run the Comrades Marathon. We probably need to have a session just to discuss what that is about. Maybe a counselor in the room as well to help us navigate what would make a man torture himself as much as you do. You've demystified what asset management is, and thank you very much for that, because we often think that people understand, and they don't always understand it the way that they should. And you've shared with us your transformation journey, and I think you've been very candid, so we appreciate that. But you also got to hear what is on people's minds, Derek, so hopefully this has added to, the very many things that I'm sure you think about a lot. And I think perhaps most importantly, Nancy was nodding very vigorously when I said I was going to call her tomorrow to double the commitment that we have from. So we've also ensured the longevity of the ABSIP bursary. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We like these conversations because, as I said, they bring faces to these very important people, and hopefully you also have inspired some young people to say they want to come and work for Stanlib and take over your job.
Yeah, we can deal with the succession issue.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you.
All right.
Thanks, guys.